I say I have to apologize if my call drops out. The internet here tends to get wonky when the wind's blowing. So,
All right, noted. Let's see. Waiting on Tom, Ken, and Mike. Give them a couple minutes, but otherwise we can get started. Will just sent me a message and let me know that the February minutes are not quite done yet. He had some questions on the Prospect Farm discussion, and so I'll follow up with him afterward, I guess, and see if we can get some of those things clarified, and then we'll send them out. And I don't know, Dick, would your suggestion just be that we approve them at the April meeting?
Sure.
Okay, sounds good.
It's always best to approve them when they are written as you would want them to be.
Right.
So it's better to just wait until they're correct, and then you can go over them and
That makes sense to me.
if you want.
Well, I expect Ken's going to be joining us. I haven't heard from Tom or Mike that they're not, but since we do have 4 of the 7 members here right now, I figure we may as well go ahead and get started with at least the first couple of things. We can't review the February minutes, so we'll just wait on that one. And then the next item on the agenda is 2021 appointments and membership. I think the first 2 things we need to cover there are Tom and Brian's term, I think, ends in 2021. And so Brian, just wanted to check in with you and see if you're planning to stay on.
I would, unless I have to be the chairman.
Okay. You don't happen to know if what Tom's intention is, do you?
I haven't talked to him. I oftentimes would reach out, but I didn't know my term came up either. I just knew Tom's did.
Yeah, I actually didn't know that. I thought for some reason it was just Tom, but then Julie reached out to me the other day and let me know that it was both you and Tom. So
no, I'd like to stay on because I feel like I've been on for a while, and it just feels good to bring some of the stuff I know in the past and keep it present.
Yeah, that's good news. Okay, well, I guess if Tom doesn't make it tonight, I'll just reach out to him personally and see what he thinks. Sure, he has his hands full right now, but
Yeah.
if he was sticking around too. So the other one, and I guess I hope that more of the commission would be here tonight to Ken's joining now to discuss this, but I find myself in a tricky position at the moment, being that I'm currently looking for housing in Jackson. I had to leave my living situation a couple of months ago and have been hopeful that I'd find something. That hasn't happened yet. I did find a place to rent basically as close to Jackson as you can possibly get without actually being in Jackson, right on the line at the top of Glen Ledge. So I am intending to live there, which is in Bartlett. The issue being for Conservation Commission members of a given town to be legal residents of that town. I haven't updated my residence yet, but obviously if it becomes clear at some point that I am definitely not going to be able to get back into Jackson, then, I'd need to make a change. And so I just wanted to kind of open up the discussion and have a little bit of a transparent, conversation about what everyone thinks is best. It's a little bit of a, you know, number one, obviously I want to limit myself to only what is allowed and legal. And so that's the first issue. And then beyond that, you know, I guess I'll just say, I would really like to stay involved and on the commission, if it's possible. And so one, you know, potential scenario that could work, and maybe Dick, you could weigh in on this a little bit, or the rest of the select board, and I'd be happy to talk to everyone there too. But the rental that I'm going into now is basically a month to month, and I've acknowledged that I'm continuing to look for something in Jackson that is where I want to live ultimately. And so my hope is to, in the near term future, be living in Jackson again. I haven't officially updated my residence, like I said, but obviously at some point, you know, it may just be too long to continue saying I'm trying to find something in Jackson. So that's where I'm at. It's too bad because I've really enjoyed this, and I don't particularly want to step down, but I also want to hear from all of you about what you think is best or what is allowed and legal and appropriate. So that's the deal.
Well, you're still a registered voter in Jackson, right?
That's correct. Yep.
And it happened a number of years ago. Wink Lees lived in Jackson, and then he was on the Conservation Commission, moved into his mother's house in Kearsarge, and it was brought to our attention that he was no longer residing in Jackson. But as you said, you're in a temporary living situation. You're still a registered voter in Jackson, and you know, I don't have any idea what a time limit on something like that would be. If, you know, you've been out of town for 2 months, I don't know. But for the time being, I would say stay with the board. We'll keep looking into it, and I hope you find someplace in Jackson to live, because I think you're a real benefit to the Conservation Commission and to the town.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that, Dick. And yeah, I mean, that's the best case scenario in my mind. So hearing you say that feels good. Yeah, and I mean, the only thing that makes me uncomfortable is voting on things that, you know, do have an impact on, for instance, you know, talking about Jackson resident taxpayer spots at Jackson Falls or something like that. And I don't know. My stance is that I feel like hopefully everyone on the commission trusts that, you know, what my intentions and motivations are, and that's the bottom line. And when I'm voting on something like that, that's what I have in mind. So the fact that I'm happen to be living across the political border hopefully won't represent a problem to anybody, because I'll be in town a lot, I think.
Yes, you will be.
Yeah, I agree with Dick full-heartedly.
I think the fact that you're continuing, that your situation is a month to month, and that you're continuing to, you know, honestly look, and you haven't had the need to, you know, change your voter registration, I would say you're still fine.
I would add as well. I mean, I think, you know, maybe 6 or 8 months out from now, we should sort of revisit it, but I'm very comfortable with what Dick is suggesting.
Well, that sounds good to me then. I guess we can continue to talk about it, and I'll keep everyone updated. And, you know, if something changes where it's clear that my living situation elsewhere is going to become more permanent, then I'll say so. But ideally, you know, it will be before that 6 or 8 month period that I find something. And maybe by putting it in a set of public minutes, someone will come forward and let me know they happen to have an apartment or a cabin for rent or something. So I have references. I have a good history, no evictions or anything like that. So Will, if you want to put that in the minutes, that would be great.
And you have a dog?
I do. And I have references for him too. He's got a good resume. So yeah.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, I think that covers that. Like I said, I'll reach out to Tom. Brian, I'm glad to hear that you're sticking around. And other than that, unless anyone else is planning to step down, I think we have a plan. Then any other thoughts with regard to that?
I have a question. If you have any alternates for the Conservation Commission. I am not going to run for selectman this year, so I'll be done. But I enjoy the Conservation Commission, and if there was a spot, even as an alternate, I know that as an alternate, you get to vote once in a while when there is not a full complement, and also you get to be heard. And I think that's the most important part of it, is just expressing ideas and seeing where it goes from there. So I might be interested in filling a spot as an alternate. If that
Yeah,
comes up.
I would support that. Do we need to make an official motion or something to establish an alternate position, or do we have?
No, I think that is all there. I think I have to petition the selectmen to appoint me as an alternate to the Conservation Commission.
Do you know if the Conservation Commission has had alternates before? I know the planning board does. And I think it would be an excellent idea, because that also allows us to make sure we get a quorum.
Well, it does. I'm looking at the RSA now. It says alternate members may be appointed, basically in this case by the selectmen. And when the alternate serves in the absence of disqualification of a regular member, the alternate shall have full voting powers.
Then I would just follow that up and ask Dick, what's the proper time? Because I would suggest that Jeff, as chair of the commission, send a letter to the selectmen supporting you as a alternate once you leave the select board.
Well, I think it'll happen, after, it usually happens after town meeting.
Okay, so we should wait and then send a letter. Yeah.
Okay.
That would be great, because we've been meaning to do that.
Sorry, Pam, I think I cut you off. I didn't quite hear the first part.
I was just going to say it's great that Dick is willing to be the alternate, because I think that's something we were thinking about doing before.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. I'm happy to write a letter in support of that. So just let me know, Dick, when you think it's the right time, or what you need.
I'll canvass the others to see if I have a chance to get appointed.
Whip the vote. All right. Okay, well, that covers that, I think. So next is Prospect Farm. Ken, I just saw your email. For whatever reason, it went into my spam folder and said something about these links have been used to access someone's information or something like that. And so I don't know if it was one of the links that you included on the email as an attachment or what, but I just noticed.
I downloaded a form from the National Forest, or from the White Mountain National Forest, and then I also downloaded a form from NIMBA, because when we were looking at Prospect Farm, and I know I was hopeful of getting some drafts of the next component of the Prospect Farm General Stewardship Management Plan. I didn't get as far as I wanted to, but I also needed to do some homework, and I was able to do that part. One of the questions that came up when we did the discussion following the questionnaire that was sent out was relative to hunting. And we did have the question about what were the National Forest rules on hunting relative to where you can shoot and so forth, because I think we found from many of those who responded in the questionnaire, they were not exactly ecstatic about hunting, I guess is the best way to sum it up. But at the same time, that's been a historical use that's been up there. And it does parallel, the adjacent abutting White Mountain National Forest land. So if I recall correctly, that's why I was trying to get the meeting minutes from last meeting just to confirm this. But my recollection is that we had agreed on hunting, but we wanted to confirm what the rules were with the National Forest. And those rules are in, give me a second, I will just, because I can read them off in 2 seconds, I just need to come up with them.
Yeah, and Ken, I think you were not quite in the meeting yet, but I was saying that Will is just about done with the minutes from the last meeting, but did have some questions on the Prospect Farm discussion itself. And so it sounded like he was going to reach out with some questions, and I can follow up with him and reach out to you to see if you have any comments.
The way that the rules read with the National Forest is it says discharging a firearm or any other implement capable of taking human life, causing injury or damaging property as follows. In or within 150 yards of a residence, building, campsite, developed recreation site, or occupied area, or across or on a forest system road or a body of water adjacent thereto, or in any manner or place whereby any person or property is exposed to injury or damage as a result of such discharge. So I think that the way that we would write the general management plan is that hunting is allowed, but you're not allowed to shoot from the forest system road, nor are you allowed to shoot over it. And
What about trails too?
And that would also hold for the town's roads as well.
What about trails?
It does not say anything on trails, and currently there are minimal trails that are not in Prospect Farm that are not the roads. That may not, hold into the future, but I think it's also tougher to manage that on trails. It obviously says that if you're shooting where you're, somebody's exposed to injury or damage, obviously if somebody's on the trail, that is going to be an issue. But most of these trails are either on the White Mountain National Forest or they're on Ballantyne's property, and he's got his property posted right now.
How about Lions? Is Lions posted?
I've never seen a posted sign up there, Dick.
Yeah. I haven't either.
Well, to be posted, you have to have the signs up.
Yeah. So I think the short answer is there's no indication that he has posted his land.
So we had talked about basically just keeping as much as we could in terms of the management of Prospect Farm in line with the rules that are laid out by the National Forest that abuts it. So, that makes sense to me to just adopt that, Ken.
Yeah, I tend to agree.
Okay, I'm just looking for guidance. So when I cut the first draft, I'm not coming up with something that everybody's wondering where it came from. Okay, the second question that we struggled with a little bit in the last session was e-bikes. And I have tried to figure out where the federal government is and where the White Mountain National Forest is. And some of you may or may not have been aware, but the Trump administration was trying to get rules through. We're going to allow all kinds of motorized recreation on all kinds of public lands, trails, be e-bikes, ATVs, you name it, snowmobiles. And a lot of that now is being throttled back with the Biden administration. So I think it's part of the reasons we've seen draft rules that have come out for federal lands, but they haven't passed into being final. And I suspect the White Mountain National Forest is still grappling with that. What I did find is NEMBA has come out on this past month in February with a summary of where the e-bike status is for here in New Hampshire. And I did attach the HTML, and I realize most of you probably didn't even have time to go through this. It is useful from two levels. One is we were trying to ask ourselves what were the definitions of e-bikes, and those definitions are there. And I think they pretty much parallel what we were discussing before. The E1 bikes, I think is what they call them, is essentially, it is motor assisted, but you have to be pedaling to make the motor work. And they cannot exceed a speed of, 20 miles an hour, I think, something like that. And the E2 bikes are pretty much the same as an E1, but you can use it also to just use it with a throttle, just the way you would with a gas pedal in a car. And again, it's limited by motor size and speed to 20 miles an hour. And then the E3 bikes, the ones that are throttle controlled, really hyped up motors, et cetera, and can whip along at well over 20 miles an hour. Essentially, you've got something that's a hybrid between an e-bike and a motorcycle for all practical purposes. My suggestion would be that we would permit the E1 bikes. And the reasons I suggest that because, and limit the riding right now to just the road system. And the reasons I recommend, I would make that suggestion is we do have a number of older people who are using these and probably would if they could access out there. And it does, and here my bias would show up, but it also opens it up for people with handicaps who are using motor systems, which my wife does on her road bike right now. She can either pedal it, or if she needs assistance on a hill, she can click on the motor and the battery so that she can hand crank her way up with a motor assist. Obviously, the E3 gets us into a different lane. And I don't think, with an E1 bike, even though some of our roads are pretty steep, I don't think we would see a lot more erosion than we would see with a regular mountain bike, because a lot of times when a rider is struggling uphill, as you know, they kind of get going and the torque on the wheel is a come and go, which can actually dig in more than if somebody is just going along a slow, consistent speed going uphill. So my recommendation would be that, along with where we have suggested that we would accept mountain bikes, because we see a lot of mountain bikes out there already, particularly on the Boggy Brook stretch in the winter, in the summer, is we would allow the E1 bikes. It's not clear what the road service is. On several of their roads in the forest, like the Bartlett Road system, they are allowing e-bikes. But this particular road, the Boggy Brook Road, for example, is not listed as such yet. And I think we would want to work with the Forest Service if we were to go in this direction to make sure that we were consistent with where they are and where we are. So that's a quick summary on what I can decipher where the Forest Service is and what we might or might not do in the proposed plan. With that, I'll look for comments.
Yeah, I guess I've ridden an E1 and I've ridden an E3. I've never been on the E2, the one that is sort of that in between.
And E2 is essentially E1. You can't go any faster or anything. It just means that the motor can be kicked in without you trying to pedal. That's
Yeah. So I've never been on one of those, but and I've been on the E1 bikes that are, touring kind of with a carriage, and you can get your groceries back and forth, and then I've been on a couple, $10,000 downhill race machines, and I have mixed feelings about them myself. I guess I'd be saying if this is a conversation about the mountain bike style getting into the woods versus the touring bike getting into the woods, they're different and what they're capable of doing. And obviously the E3 is out of the question, and that's just a dirt bike with an electric motor with all the torque.
Right. That's the same conclusion I had.
Yeah, that's just a quiet dirt bike. And then in terms of what we're calling a road is, through Prospect, there's not a whole lot if we're not considering like what's Beth Hendrick and Hubbs Loop. Are those trails or are those roads?
I think they're historic roads, but they're not Class 6 roads.
So a Class 6 road is what we're considering?
Right now, That's what we have to decide, whether we're just limiting it to the class 6, which would essentially be out to the gate on quail, out to the gate on boggy, staying within our jurisdiction, or class 6 actually goes all the way up to Hall's Ledge Lookout.
Right, that's what I was wondering. And then the other part would be, can you stop people from riding on those with those bikes if the Forest Service says you can? Like, can we really, because we're just in between,
Yeah, and that's why I was suggesting if we went this direction, we might approach the Forest Service to see whether they would permit them on their roads as well or not. It sounds like you can kind of petition, and if the Forest Service feels like the road is up and capable of taking it, they would permit it. They have permitted, at least from what I can get from the list that's in the NIMBA thing, is they have done that on several places like the Bartlett Experimental Roads.
okay. Yeah, it's a difficult topic, because I'm really pretty strongly against them in the backcountry. But I see them as a really cool thing for helping people get places without using fuel and still getting exercise. And we live in such a steep town. It's really difficult to ride places around here.
Yeah, I think if somebody
E-bike can really span that.
I think of somebody like Peter Minich, who isn't a resident in Jackson, but as many know, he was the, one of the leaders early on in a lot of the mountain bike trails, et cetera, here in the valley. And, his medical conditions now have him riding an e-bike. Just take on the very less. You'd be opening it up for that. Obviously, it is a slippery slope, though. There's no question.
Yeah, because I know some very talented mountain bikers who get passed on mountain biking trails by e-bikes climbing. I mean, just going past like going backwards. So we're not talking about getting the bikes into those places, but it just needs to be part of the conversation and the education for like what that can look like. 20 miles an hour up a hill is quite fast if you're going 7 and struggling. It's.
If those bikes that were passing you just out of hand, because I think normally if somebody's going 20 miles an hour uphill, I would guess that they're an E2 using the throttle or an E3.
No, you can hit the like turbo excel and pedal. I mean, you can get past like you're going backwards.
Yeah.
On a climb.
Well, the other alternative is just say no. And then we'll have to ask the ADA question.
Yeah, it just seems unfortunate because, of course, to climb up Carter Notch Road on a bicycle, if you're allowed to have an e-bike, people are going to ride up there, which is a really good solution to a problem versus driving your car up there to go ride your bike. When if you have an e-bike, there's a really good chance that same person would just pedal their bike up Carter Notch Road.
All the way from town.
Yeah, and I think that's wonderful. I'm just going on both sides of it, like I tend to always do. So, not very helpful, but that's just kind of how I feel about it.
I tend to think it's not going to represent a huge problem in the immediate future. I would almost think, obviously if at some point there were additional trails developed, or if, there were a couple of single track mountain bike trails or something like that, I could see then kind of revisiting it and discussing more specifically what and where they are allowed. But I don't know. I mean, I guess I'm curious whether, it's not prohibited right now, right? And do we sense that there are that many people? I understand that once you do make it officially allowed, that might increase, and that e-bikes in general are becoming more and more popular. But this isn't something that once we say it's allowed, it's set in concrete, we can't revisit and monitor as time goes on, right?
Yeah.
No, I think
what would be helpful also is if we do have a policy, or at least one we think we want to run with, then I'd be happy to touch bases with the National Forest System, try to coordinate with them so that we're not running into something that's, I think as we've all agreed, that the more that we can make these two land units working in concert, the better. And I'd be happy to approach them and see where they are as well before we finalize it. But I'd like to go to them. If I am going to give them a call, with an understanding where we think we are or think we might want to be.
Yeah, it almost seems like checking with them first, maybe, and just because if they are going to allow it, or if they've already decided that they are allowed there, but they're just not advertising it yet, then
I don't think it's allowed on yours yet because the sign, I think it's, well, I take it back. I don't believe that it is posted as no motorized where the gate is. I believe it's posted on the Prospect Farm gate in the summer, but I don't believe it is posted either way. And yet the gate is telling you, at least there's no motorized vehicle traffic out there unless you got the key. So if they're saying no, they haven't posted it as non-motorized the way that going up. I'm pretty certain that I have to check the gate. And I know that the current ordinance says no motorized vehicles with the exception of, your deer hunting, shoot a deer. You can go to the selectmen and get the key to get through. And then during the winter, starting in March 1st, there's no motorized vehicles up there at all. Outside of groomers or trail maintenance or emergency. Or the
I guess that this is maybe my bigger concern, which, as we've sort of said, this isn't so much the case with Prospect, but the trails that we do have in town here that you would want to mountain bike aggressively are pretty aggressive. And my concern is once the e-bike conversation starts happening, that it's just going to bring in more e-bikes to places that we wouldn't think people would want to ride, but believe me, they want to ride them. So that's, that if the Forest Service says you can ride on a trail, then you can ride it. That's just kind of where my feeling is, where I draw the line is that my concern is once the e-bike gets out onto the trails, that some people are okay with people mountain biking, and this is some of the more aggressive stuff, it's going to cross the line because the speed it's up at the next level. And if people feel it's uncomfortable to be walking on a trail that someone can mountain bike on versus walking on a trail that someone can e-bike on, guess what? The mountain biker is going to get kicked off that trail too, because you're going to get put into the same group as mountain bikers, because no one's going to differentiate e-bike from mountain biker. You're just a super fast mountain biker. So I think long term, that's sort of where I'm like, this is going to get sticky. But maybe not so much in Prospect, but I think there'll be other places in town.
Yeah, and I think what we're saying with mountain biking up there, since that's not really road bike, we are recognizing that people can mountain bike on the existing road systems. Because there's there's heavy family mountain biking, that kind of stuff out on Boggy Brook during the summer. And I don't think we want to discourage that. It's
No.
good to see families out doing that sort of thing. And a lot of families, I think, feel comfortable because their kids don't have to worry about cars and stuff. And that road can take it.
Yeah.
And I don't see many, I spend a chunk of time out there. I don't see many mountain bikers actually going up on the town land. I see the bulk of it out on Boggy Brook. I don't know what others have seen, but that's my observation.
I think the majority of it, yeah. I mean, I know the other trails get ridden for sure, but I think the numbers are low enough and people are responsible and respectful of the conditions, and that's why they hold up, where it's not noticed that they're being ridden.
What I'm hearing right now is mountain bikes on the existing class 6 roads, and leave it at that.
Makes sense to me.
I mean, I'm not opposed to people riding the. I mean, I thought people have always ridden the Beth Hendrick and Hub's Loop, but if that's not something that we support, I just didn't know that was not part of what was being ridden. And I think people ride, all the way up to Hall's Ledge as well, and don't see any reason why, that road that as a path isn't sustainable. If it becomes a highway for, people on e-bikes ripping up and down, because you can do it 3 times and not feel exhausted.
Well, yeah, I think we got 2 things here. I just want to make sure I'm getting it correct. The e-bikes I think I'm hearing is, let's just hold off and not put it in this version. And then the second question, to try to separate it from the e-bike question, is just, where are we permitting mountain bikes or not permitting mountain bikes?
Yeah, I guess I see it as 2 questions.
Yeah, and that's, I think, if I'm hearing it correctly, e-bike one, the answer in the current situations, no.
I'm kind of torn on it. I mean, I could see the value in letting people do it on Boggy Brook Road, say, especially if the Forest Service is going to allow it, or if that's kind of their general policy on something like that. I get where Brian's coming from, and I could see saying, and this obviously gets more and more difficult to enforce or educate people on, but I could see saying e-bikes are allowed on the road that leads into national forest land, whereas mountain bikes are allowed on, the roads and trails of Prospect Farm.
I guess I agree with Ken that I feel like at this point e-bikes should be allowed to go down Boggy Brook. I can't ever see a reason why someone shouldn't be able to ride their bike up Carter Notch and down Boggy Brook Road. Just, it's a road, it feels like a road. It really is a road.
What about Quail?
I guess I feel the same. Class 6 road, like it's a.
Yeah, actually, I'm not sure. It's kind of weird. I get contradictory information. It's very clear that it's Class 6 road all the way to Hall's Ledge. It's a little confusing as to whether the little spur out on Boggy Brook Prospect is Class 6 or not. And it's a little confusing as to whether the little spur on the Quail before you hit the Forest Service gate, which is not very far, is the same. If I get off, I'm getting a signal and my internet connection is a little unstable. So if I disappear, I'll have to just sign back in. But it's clear that it's a Class 6 road up to Hall's Ledge. Dick, I don't know whether you've got better insight than I do. I think it's now considered that those 2 little spurs may be Class 6 roads, but they don't go back for historic reasons. They just go because that's the way somebody drew it on the map in town one time.
Yeah, well, I guess that's like, can we, Iron Mountain Road's a Class 6 road. Can you keep an e-bike from riding up that? Probably not. And East Pasture, if that's a Class 6 road, can you, so I guess whatever the rules are is what we'd have to follow for that. But I would just assume not see e-bikes go up and down all that stuff, because, it can be hard on the soils and whatnot. But if it's a road and people can drive a truck on it, it seems crazy that we're going to tell someone that they can't ride an e-bike on it.
And that is actually true when you go up to Class 6 toward Hall's Ledge. That road does not have great drainage, and it does have drainage problems.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah. Well, education, I guess. Maybe we should talk about how to educate people.
Yeah.
To do all the stuff.
I hear that frequently, Brian. I think the challenge you always have with education is it's like the National Forest, where every year 50, 60, 70% of your visitors are new.
Yeah.
You don't really get to hit them before they go out. So, a lot of people champion education, but it has some fatal flaws to it. And a lot of times people make that decision, but it doesn't really work in the field. And I'm nervous of relying on that in a big way outside of, you know, you have a sign there that says you can do this and you can't do that.
No, I totally agree. I was sadly being sarcastic because
Yeah.
I don't, if somebody sees what they want, they're gonna go do it. And you have to make it really obvious that you can't.
Well, in the interest of time, am I correct that we have great hesitancy on the e-bike thing?
I would just say that we'd be accepting of class 1 e-bikes and class 2 e-bikes as a mobility or a motorized or a power driven mobility device that would fall under ADA requirements, and then just leave it until the White Mountain National Forest standardizes whatever their approach will be, and then we would fall in line with them. But I can't see them eliminating class 1 just because they're.
Yeah, it's actually been, I did spend a chunk of time today reading through it. The way that the motorized ADA, the best that I can get from the Forest Service's manuals, et cetera, and God knows there's enough of them, and they're a gazillion pages long, is because they got caught in this fight where if you're handicapped, I know that this came up with Flat Mountain Pond decades ago, where somebody claimed that they were handicapped and wanted to be able to use an ATV to get into all kinds of places in the White Mountain National Forest. So what's come out of it nationally is if you are in a motorized wheelchair, the wheelchair is defined as I can use it indoors. Then you can use them almost any place outside of like the AT or something where, you know, it's pretty clear that you can't, you know, there's specific regulations that you can't. So the ADA right now doesn't really know with, you know, where handicapped people are using motor assisted devices for recreation. They still haven't caught up with that, is the best that I can determine. With the exception that you can petition the Forest Service to be able to use them in certain ways. That's what my research to date shows. So it's not clear what the Forest Service does or does not allow, you know, for the handicapped person. And that I'll contact the National Forest and see where they are on that. But that's I couldn't find any clarity in all the stuff I was plowing through.
I was just looking at that distinction as throttle, not a throttle. That if that were to be how we would make the exception of allowing a throttle-driven device that could be ridden in a more aggressive manner, that it would only be allowable under those circumstances.
Well, I can take that idea and go to the Forest Service and see so that we're not caught with, you know, somebody gets confused because all of a sudden they've hit this imaginary line between two property boundaries and whoops, you know, you went from legal to illegal, which is what we're trying to prevent.
Yeah. Yeah, hopefully it can stay within the E1 range. That would be great.
Yeah. Let me, I will follow up with the Forest Service on that. Okay. The remaining two issues that I had that, and one I think is a little bit newer, but currently, the Jackson Ski Touring Foundation, you know, does have the agreement with the town, and it provides the town with certain services, and then in return gets to, you know, roam and use the trail system both behind the library as well as at Prospect Farm. And that agreement is, if I recall correctly on the details, is for snowshoeing and for cross-country skiing, but it's not for walking. And we do run into a problem, and particularly where micro-spiking is very, very popular today. I mean, I do a number of winter hikes still Most people don't even bother to bring their snowshoes with them anymore, unless it's after a fresh snowstorm, because the trails are so beat out. They're just simply micro spiking. And, that becomes a serious issue when the temperatures get warm, because the micro spiking or walking on the trails there, or any place for that matter, just start to punch hole and you get pretty big post holing. And so it does beg the question of just where is the town about walking there on the groomed trails in the winter? That's different than can you walk at Prospect Farm? If you want to put your snow, but currently that agreement is for snowshoeing and for cross-country skiing on the groomed trails. And are we comfortable with that? Because some people have raised the question, can I just go up there and walk? And, if you get into that, into the Whitaker Woods situation where there will be a lot of conflict between the skiers and the walkers. And you run into a second problem, and that is that the Ski Touring Foundation has limited parking up there. And, those restrictions are set by the agreement that Ballantyne gave to Jackson Ski Touring Foundation. The Ski Touring Foundation has to operate under the whims of the conditions that Ballantyne has put in that agreement. The Ski Touring Foundation does not have the ability to just go in and say, we can open this up to anybody. And, I think the issue that we're looking at is if it becomes, well known to popular media or whatever, that you can walk into some group trails at Jackson, we will get a whole new host of conflicts between skiers, snowshoers, and walkers up there. And we have some of that already. And so it begs the question of what is our policy in the winter, or what is the policy that we want to put forth?
Hey, Ken, can you just reiterate, did you say that the Ballantynes stated in their agreement that it's ski or snowshoe in winter only, or that's your agreement?
The way that it went, Brian, is essentially the Ski Touring Foundation, has a written agreement with Ballantyne, and that written agreement basically says that it is for skiers and snowshoers in the winter.
Okay. Which makes sense because it limits the access on his own property.
That is essentially the agreement that the Ski Touring Foundation, I believe, is in the 5-year, renewable agreement that the Ski Touring Foundation has with the town. I'd have to double check all the fine wording, but that's my understanding.
I guess I could start with my understanding of how it works currently, parking aside, because clearly the parking is the thing that can be controlled easily. Up at Prospect Farm, since that's also the way you get to National Forest hiking trails, I feel like it's always been understood that if you're going to go hiking on those trails, you're going to be polite and you're not going to smash the cross-country grooming. And that's been the de facto, since I've been around. However you want to write a rule to say that or not, as a town, it becomes a bigger issue over town. But I think from my perspective, you can't park there, but that is the access to hiking trails. And then behind the library, that's the way you get to the Mystery House Loop, which is supposed to be a snowshoe trail. So for the most part, it should be people snowshoeing gently down the skate groomed part of the trail or making their own path off on the edge in their snowshoes. Kind of like, the access into Zealand Hut or other places where there's skiers and snowshoers trying to each have their own little patch of snow. And obviously, if demand is going up from both sides, we're going to have to make a rule. But I feel like, that's my understanding of how it works currently, which is everyone gets to go as long as they're all polite. Are you saying being polite?
And if I put my hearing hat on just for a moment here, we are working with the National Forest to try to resolve it. But in the old days, the trail that went to the trailhead was right before you took the left to go up the hill toward Camp Gowan. And so it was almost a non-issue. People just walked that short distance. The hikers got on that trail and went. As you know now, the new trailhead is up near where the summer parking lot is. And then that takes off from there. And I don't think it's an issue if hikers go up to the new trailhead. But if it turns out that everybody knows that you can just use that and all of Boggy Brook or all of, the Halls Ledge, the Wildcat Valley Trail or the Quail Trail as hiking trails, the demand is out there for that kind of use. And we're just going to see it go up, and particularly if it gets into social media real quick. And it will cause a problem because if it gets out that you can do that, particularly where you can walk your dogs up there as well, then we're going to force the Ski Foundation to have to really play heavy traffic cop at the Valentine parking lot. Because that lot is intended only for people with a Jackson pass. Understanding Jackson residents can get a free pass to go up and use the Prospect Farm Park for skiing and for snowshoeing.
Yeah, I mean, that would be the one way to cut out a lot of rules, is to just have a big sign at Valentine's lot that says, if you want to park here, you need to be a pass holder of Jackson Cross Country, and it's for skiing and snowshoeing only.
Yeah, unfortunately.
But Ken, your hope, I guess, was to somehow incorporate that into the general management plan, or?
Well, I think, we do want to address it because the Forest Service, I think, is trying to figure out where we are on it as well. Because they're grappling with the same kind of issue of the big danger that I see out there is the minute it hits social media, it's like Franconia Ridge, 2 become 4, 16 become 50 or 80. It's not a serious problem now. There is some conflict now between some people who are out there walking and skiers, and the skiers get upset with the walkers. And walkers get upset that they've been called out. So it is an issue that's out there right now. And my thought was we ought to try to address this before it becomes a bigger and bigger issue.
How often is the agreement between ski touring and the town updated? Is that like a 5-year?
I believe it's, yes, I believe that's correct. And Ellen is actually, I can see is on this. She can correct me if I'm wrong. I think we renewed it recently. The first one was 5, and I think we're on the second 5. And there are reciprocal things there because the Ski Touring Foundation, not only does that, but it does the other stuff with the grammar school and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, I would like to see, I don't know how to do it, but like have the document say, ideally the town would like to encourage all of these, but realize that ski touring is a heavy thing up there in the winter, and try to work out how to have multiple use and not have it be a conflict. I don't know if that's going so far as to try to get hikers, differentiating between people who want to just walk on the groomed surface and those who are just trying to access the trails that go out further into the national forest and trying to make different access, or, getting into the nitty gritty of the rules. I know when you get to like downhill ski areas, I'm very limited with their agreements, but they basically have something that says like, yeah, it's the national forest, it's the people's land, but you put a lot of money into the snow. So the snow is the value added thing that you can protect and legally defend. So the town could potentially start getting into that, that kind of agreement when it comes time to update it.
And people can walk out there with snowshoes. That's, I think the real question we're dealing with is microspikes is the name of the game. If it's packed, the hell with the snowshoes. Or in many cases, you don't even need microspikes. I mean, to walk on groomed trails, you don't need microspikes most of the time unless it's clear ice.
And then there's also those occasions when the surface that you're going to go hike on or run on or microspike on is what you think is going to be firm, but because you go to Prospect, now you're going to walk on a groomed trail to get to who knows where the trail is that you're thinking you're accessing. But instead of walking on a firm trail, the firm trail is actually sugary and soft because it got groomed, and now what you thought was going to be firm is a soft trail you're walking on, and you had good intentions, but it still doesn't work. You know, so it's just tricky. And I kind of have to agree, if Jackson Ski Tour has an agreement, sort of like what Tom was saying about protecting a surface, you know, about providing a service, and then you're allowed to just walk on it, it seems kind of ridiculous. It's almost as if you were asking to, you know, use the fields, you know, the soccer fields, and they say you can, but you can't stop people from playing softball while you're playing soccer. It's sort of ridiculous. Like, why would I set myself up here if someone can just do this other thing that's ruining the experience? But you need to be able to access these places on foot, because how else can you get there? So it's snowshoe only, you know. I don't know what the answer is, unless there's a separate side of the road that's just the left-hand side is for snowshoeing and walking, and so be it. Like, if you're going to walk, that's where you have to
Agreement
go.
right now is not preventing snowshoeing. The question here, I think, is walking or microspiking.
I mean, could the language in the management plan or the recommendation be something along the lines of use in the winter shall be in accordance with or I guess use on groomed trails in the winter shall be in accordance with the special use permit that's operated by Jackson Ski Touring, and shall be, you know, a use that does not degrade the quality of the experience for Jackson Ski Touring users. For example, snowshoes rather than, you know, boots and micro spikes. I don't know exactly how to sum it up, but something along those lines, possibly. And then, like Tom said, some more signage, some more education.
Yeah, 'cause the management plan, I guess, doesn't have to spell out every single detail. It could say the intent of the townspeople, how we want to see it managed, and then the details could be spelled out every so often as that special use permit gets updated between between the town and ski touring. You know, as more and more conflict happens, as there's less and less snow, you know, maybe it just gets more stringent over time, and we hold off with rules until we need them, but have the general language down in the management thing that says the townspeople of Jackson recognize, you know, we encourage these winter uses, starting with skiing on down, or however it would be worded, you know, so that the
Especially permit right now with the Forest Service is not clear, so we can't just go and plot that. Or the Ski Touring Foundation is trying to work that out with the Forest Service right now to get some clarity. And as on the Boggy Brook, you know, there's a non-issue with hikers on snowshoes going up to the new trailhead. And then at that point, they actually should be leaving Boggy Brook and getting onto the hiking trails.
Yeah.
The problem is
they're on skis with snowshoes on
because
they know.
And you microspike and go all the way down till you hit, you know, the Rainbow Trail that goes up toward, or the trail up to Garden Notch Dome. So you do get people who just say the heck with, you know, staying on the hiking trail and just going to go down the east out, which is all packed out for me. Of course, the more that they actually get onto the snowshoe, onto the regular hiking trail at the trailhead and pack it out with snowshoes, then it becomes easier and easier for them to follow their own guidelines. But otherwise, there's a tendency to follow the pack.
I think, and sorry I'm late. I'm super late. I forgot there was a meeting. But I think that the idea of putting in language that is fairly general, as Tom suggested, that just is fairly general, that says, you know, that, you know, the town, you know, recognizes the importance of its partnership with Ski Tour and whatever, and hikers shall use best practices as to mitigate any kind of, you know, structural damage on groom services, you know, something like that. So we have a line in there that's basically fairly generic as trends change and as technology changes and as gear changes, but essentially says that one of the priorities is protecting groomed surfaces. So using best practices to protect the groomed surfaces. And then, like you said, putting signage up there, because it's super hard to kind of enforce that kind of thing. It's super hard to stay on it. I think it's one of those things where, you know, I've noticed like one of the things on the ski touring website is that it's always the reminder under the trail report, like, hey, please don't walk on the trails, please don't bare boot on the trails. So it's, you know, how do we get that word out? Because people that are going up to Carter Dome or people that are going to the, you know, stay at the hut in the winter aren't going to be reading a ski report, but what might they be looking at? Like, how could we kind of get that language out there? Because yeah, it can certainly ruin an experience, and it can hurt a skier if there's 3-foot post holes in the surface. But I don't know what we could do beyond having general language and signage.
And, you know, obviously, on the Class 6 road, a hiker should be allowed to snowshoe up to where the new trail is, and then get on to the actual trail system that they're seeking. Okay, I think I've got the guidance that I need on that. And then the last one, and I'm not sure we need to resolve this one this evening, but there is snowmobiling and ATVs. I think as we know from the last time when we went through the questionnaire, you know, there was the petition warrant that actually allows snowmobiling up there, but it's almost, and the question is, do we want to extinguish that in this general management plan? And if we do, then we would have to figure out how to have this general management be accepted so that it supersedes the warrant article that has been passed. Because we also have the older articles, if you recall, it said, yes, you can snowmobile up there, but they got to go build their own trail system. And then there was a warrant article that was passed that said no. And then some people petitioned that said yes, but it never resolved the issue of where is that separate trail system, or where's the parking with the yes. And so in theory, somebody can still go up there, drop their snowmobile off, snowmobile up the Hall's Ledge, etc. They can't park up there, but they could have somebody drop them off in a machine, drive back down to town, and then walk back up and get on their snowmobile. And about the only place they can really legally snowmobile would be up to Hall's Ledge and back out, because they can't snowmobile out on Boggy Brook or Quail because that's not permitted on the National Forest property.
Ken, do they have to get a key from the town for the gate?
Well, to be honest, the gate is open in the winter.
There is no gate.
So,
It's open for the skiers and groomer. So the gate is closed at the end of the ski season. And the Forest Service gates on Quail and Boggy Brook are closed at the end of the ski season.
my recollection from the survey that we sent out was that there were a lot of comments asking essentially for no motorized use, and very few comments either asking for that or listing that as a use that someone thinks should be allowed. So there's that. And then the only other, I think, tricky part of that is if we do say no motorized use, does that put us in a gray area again with e-bikes, or do we have to just define that on another level? I don't know. It seemed to me that most people were in support of no motorized use in that area.
But I think snowmobiles are different because they're loud and they're gas powered, so there's a lot of exhaust and they take up a lot of room.
Yeah, the problem was we have the petition article that was passed. I think the question here, and all of us are on the same page about what we think is the right thing. The question is, what do we do with the petition article that was passed a number of years ago?
I guess I guess I don't know how difficult it would be to make happen, but I guess my inclination would be to make it official based on the comments of the survey that we sent out, and I guess whatever everyone else on the commission thinks. But I don't know. It seemed like that was the general consensus.
Okay, when this document is put to sleep and is brought to the town for a vote, are the townspeople going to be able to cherry pick the parts so that they can deal with snow machines and not grooming machines and e-bikes, but not mountain bikes? Are they going to be able to pick it apart or pick the parts of it that they like? Or is it going to be just a document, yes or no?
Yeah, that's a great question, Dick, and and you may have far more experience. If we encouraged it to be a Chinese menu, then the forest plan that's been put forth all become fair game for anybody and everybody to try to change at town meeting. I would hate to see us go that way, but I don't know that, somebody, I guess, could propose to amend it, when it's brought before the town.
Wondering for the,
Huh?
sorry to interrupt, Ken. I was wondering in terms of a management plan, if when we bring the management plan to the town, whatever mechanism it gets voted on and accepted as the guiding document, if we use those more, broad yet specific enough language that it doesn't need to be specifically every little thing voted on like a warrant article, and then those specific things that need to get taken out of it. So we could have a management plan that basically says we live hiking, biking, skiing with the nuances in it that we see about conservation and erosion, et cetera, et cetera. And then at the end of it, we ask that to be voted on. And then separately we say, and there's a couple things we want to clean up. Like, for example, we specifically want to vote down snowmobiling, and we specifically want to do these other four. So then in 10 years, we can still have the general management plan that could then allow, other specific little tidbits to be voted in as warrant articles as need be. So if that's a way to thread the needle of having a general plan that states the vision of the property for the.
What I might suggest is take Dick's excellent question. Let's get a full draft and then come back and ask how we might address Dick's question. That might help us understand whether we want it to be a flat up or down, or whether we want it to allow it to be amended, but I'm not sure that we could cut off amendments. What's your experience, Dick? Yeah, Dick, do you have any experience as to, whether we, when this comes before the town, if it does come before the town as a warrant article, whether we can, say that it's an up or down, or whether we can try to cut off amendments?
Oh, I'm sorry. The only experience I have is with the forestry plan that was presented, and we had meetings, and it was I don't know if it was a full year process, but it was certainly months of process. But then it was voted on as a document. It wasn't.
But that was by the selectmen, wasn't it? Not as a warrant article, or am I wrong?
I believe that was voted on by the town.
Okay, I'll go back to the town and see what I can find.
Yes, I was thinking the analogy would be, and I don't know the mechanisms, how these work, but the town has a zoning master plan that doesn't tell you your house has to be 25 feet from the road, but it does say we like nice countryside looking places more, so there's the master plan and then there's the zoning rules. So I'm wondering if we can kind of have the low key analogy to that. So we have.
You can, Tom, but like the master plan, then its enforceability is very limited.
the master plan helps you initiate regulations in the future because of it. And it gives you the backup of why you're doing that. You're not being arbitrary. It's part of the master plan, and that was voted on. So it has a purpose. It's kind of like a combination of a dream sheet and forward-looking document where you're trying to second guess what's going to happen in the future. So it does help you. So you are never accused of being arbitrary in putting a regulation in place.
Like it wouldn't stop snowmobiling is a quick example.
Right.
Yeah. I guess
Well, that was voted on, so.
my understanding of this process that we're going through, it's more of that general principle so that when we do ask the town to vote on regulations, we're not seen as being capricious, you know, that we've thought about and the town has agreed to a general vision for, you know, we've, you know, like we've had the survey, we've had these discussions, we then will presumably have some public session. And then we can get our specific rules out of it, you know, because in the past, I feel like we've generally tried to have the fewest regulations possible that actually become warrant articles that need to be enforced until we need them, so that we just don't have 1,001 different rules allowing this and prohibiting that. And
I like that framework.
Well, as you promote recreation, you've got to think ahead, because look at Jackson Falls. I mean, we didn't understand what the impacts were going to be when we first took over Jackson Falls and created parking. And it was such a good thing to put in all those parking spaces so people could use it. And now we're talking about backing off from the parking spaces so we can't, or so that not that many people can use it. So anyway, yeah, you do have to look to the future if you're going to promote recreation. You really have to think about it. So that's all I'll put in for a moment.
And that's really true of the e-bike.
Yes.
The reason I brought up the postal link problem, it's just, once it gets out in social media, you know, Prospect Farm is Whitaker Woods, then you force the Ski Touring Foundation into trying to be the police cop at their parking lot, and you get a lot of conflict between the skiers and the hikers. But I mean, I watched this with Franconia and Notch. You know, the minute it hit social media, that place went off the charts. You had up to 1,000 cars being parked on I-93, and that occurred in a very short number of years. But social media make these things bloom in a very short amount of time.
Yeah, just drive through Randolph on Route 2 some weekend during the summer and see the cars lined up on the road.
And that's what happened with Jackson Falls. It was social media.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm a little nervous of having a lot, you know, super vagueness.
well, yeah, I want super vagueness, and I want rules that can be enforced if we need them. I personally find it hard. There's nothing on paper currently that has the town's vision laid out for Prospect Farm. You know, so I guess yeah, I'm a little bit confused in the process here, because I really think there's great value in stating pretty succinctly like what it is the town values to allow and promote up there without getting into the weeds of a lot of things. And I also think we need to get into the weeds of the things that are currently problems and will be problems in the future. But we don't have anything on paper that says the Conservation Commission will manage Prospect Farm towards these ends because the town has said so. You know, like on a lot of these things, to a certain degree, we don't have a leg to stand on because the town hasn't ever written it down. So I do really think it's important to have, even if it's
Actually,
just
that's not entirely true. When the Conservation Commission was first formed in the 70s, there were stuff that was put out, like the no snowmobiling, no snowmobiling, and so forth. And the town has also passed certain ordinances about, you can't drive up there post December 1st. The town has passed ordinances about no camping up there. So it's not like there's nothing that exists. I think the problem is it's scattered all over the place. And so if you're a user and you want to go to one place to find out what can I do, can't do at Prospect, you got to look up the town ordinances, and then you got to look up the master plan right now, and so forth. So it's kind of a hodgepodge of how do you find this information.
Yeah, I agree that it's a hodgepodge and it's hard to find it out, but we also don't have that high level thing that says the reason that those things exist. Like without a master plan or whatever you want to call it, I can go back to the minds of the people in the 1970s that wrote some of the rules and understand what point they were trying to get across necessarily. So I kind of want to have both things, the vision and then the specifics that get us there.
Yeah, and I think as Dick pointed out, and as we all know on the Wildcat Falls, we didn't really have a good set of rules, and now we got a headache, and we're trying to figure out how to put the genie back in the box.
Yes, and I guess I could point out there too, like there's not really a general statement of how and what we're making those rules for Jackson Falls. I feel like everyone, to a certain degree, has their understanding of their purpose and how they're managed, but I think we're kind of coming at that management plan as we're in the middle of a headache at Jackson Falls, and up at Prospect, we're ahead of it. So I would like to kind of do both in this swoop, both get that general statement down and then start to pick away at the rules. And, I guess ultimately I don't really care if they're like lumped together or if they're separate, but I do think both the particulars and the vision are important.
Well, I'm going to suggest, in the interest of time, that we put the draft together, then we come back, because this is going to be a critical question of how do we move it forward.
My only other thought to Tom's earlier point would be that I think we can still be very specific in most areas within this general management plan and not have any kind of controversy on a town vote, but recognize that there may be a couple of things that would throw a wrench in getting the overall plan passed if we were to put them as concrete rules within it. And so if we say, okay, maybe snow machining and maybe e-bikes are a question that people want to vote specifically or individually on outside of the general management plan, and that might cause problems in getting the plan as a whole passed, we pull those couple of things out, recognizing that as a conservation commission, we make this recommendation within the plan to vote on this subject and then make it happen at the same time, basically.
Well, let me suggest, Jeff, I think the plan was, once we get a draft, we were going to hold a public hearing. And that will give us a better flavor as to how to address this question.
That makes sense. I think Mike was trying to chime in too.
I was going to say, is it possible for these parts that we're not entirely sure on? I mean, I feel like in the research we've done and people we've talked to and how the town is moving towards is that, can we say in the plan that we are managing exclusively for non-motorized recreation? And so at that point, we're not saying there's no snowmobiling, we're not saying there's no e-bikes, but we're saying in the management plan that, we are almost exclusively just managing for non-motorized recreation. And then those sort of like, those other decisions, whether or not we have e-bikes, whether or not there are snowmobiles allowed there, are then decided by ordinances from the town, while the management plan is focusing, we're saying this is what we're going to do. We're not going to create a new we're not planning to create a new snowmobile trail system. We're not planning to, facilitate or put in infrastructure for these things. Anything that we're going to be doing is on the plan is just going to be for non-motorized recreation.
Yeah.
I will draft, and you guys will.
I just want to give another moment on what Tom was saying about where the Conservation Commission stands, and just understand that question a little bit better. And giving us some teeth. Are you saying what we as the current Conservation Commission feel, like as of this group who has been working on this together, what our feelings are of how we would like to protect Prospect Farm? Or are you saying something that shows what we feel the townspeople want us to do as a commission? Or are we talking about what we feel the Bakers and the old Conservation Commission wanted us to do with this space, you know, as Prospect Farm, you know, or like, because it's sort of different, and I see that's what pulls us away sometimes from getting certain things accomplished, you know. And I think with the Jackson Falls, it's kind of that way too, is the reason that things get held up is because we look at it in different ways, and we try to think about the other people, what people we know want, and it may not be what we as the commission want. So that's all. I'm just trying to figure out within that idea, you know, is that we want as a commission?
The way that I, try to approach the draft outline, et cetera, today is when the land was given to the town by Baker in the terms of her will, in the way that it was accepted by the town, we can't change that.
No, I know that.
Okay, and that was the largest piece of framework that I started with this, because I think it's illegal. And the Jackson Falls group fell into that trap in their early stage because they were talking about making it for Jackson residents only. And like when I was with that committee and I went back and I took a look at the deed when the land was given to the town, it allowed anybody, over on Wentworth Resort to use it. Many of those people are out of town. And so if the town proceeded down with only for Jackson residents, they were going to end up in, because they were defining the very terms of which the land came over to the town. And so I don't think we can breach those things unless we're willing to put out something that we, are willing to put up a lot of lawyer dollars to try to defend if somebody challenges it.
Yeah, but within this commission, our commission as a whole might be wholeheartedly behind what is actually written in the Baker Trust. I mean, that's what I don't get, like why we're on board.
Universities that got millions of dollars in endowment, and the university turned around and tried to use it for another purpose. And the following generations came back and sued the university and said, if you don't use it for the purpose that we told you and you accepted it on, we want all of our $1 million back. And I don't think we want to set the town up for that kind of scenario. But that did actually happen with a very large university and a very big endowment gift. And that's why I start off that legally, there were the terms that Baker set, and the town voted to accept those terms back in the 30s and 40s when the town accepted it. So that was the starting point. And then, point number 2 is then we went out and solicited people's opinion through the questionnaire. So I'm looking at what we're molding here is not just what we, the Conservation Commission, but rather what the Conservation Commission did is looked at the terms of the easement, the will, the terms of the acceptance by the town. And then within that framework, we put out the questionnaire to try to resolve the stuff that we're working with right now, which is different than we just sat down as a Conservation Commission and said, this is what I believe in.
But so Tom, what else, what is the missing part of this then?
No, I think what Ken just said is what I think has been lacking, right? Like, I think we understood how the intent and the legal strings that came with the land when it came to the town.
Right.
I think we all had a pretty good agreement on for what purpose it was being managed, but that wasn't perhaps widely spread throughout town, or not everybody in town agreed with it. There was no sign of the town backing it. So I think it's really important as we write this that we do say like, hey, we had, you could take the survey. This is what the survey said. We're going to have this public input. This is what the public meeting says, so that we're documenting right now, like the legal bounds in which we're operating. And then also say, hey, yeah, not only do we, the Conservation Commission, think that we love hiking and biking or whatever the particulars are, but the town also says that those things are allowed. And then from those general principles, we can get into the nitty gritties of like, oh yeah, we want to invite this group to make more hiking trails, or we want to disallow this particular type of electronic bike, but we've agreed once, not once for all, but at least shown that we've done our homework and kind of gotten the town and the Conservation Commission in the same place and written a guiding document that spells out the general guidelines of how this board, us now and us in the future, will write the specific rules to achieve those goals. And that's the thing that I think has been lacking, as we've talked about, the last time around, and all of a sudden we're like, wait, they're, changing ordinances. We didn't have a document that said the town generally wants this to happen and it's allowed under the terms. And it's a little bit splitting hairs on my part to say this, but I think it's, it's like writing the entry sentence of a paragraph, like, we want this, here's how we will achieve it. And maybe some of those ways to achieve it need to become warrant articles or not, when we get into that. But I just think it's really important that we have a pretty succinct statement that is backed by all the surveys and public input we've got as to what the major points for which we're managing are.
We try to educate the town when we put the questionnaire out that, here's the framework that we're asking these questions within, because it's a legal framework.
Yeah, well, I guess we're on the right path. It's just, if we're going to do all the work, just make sure we're all on board,
All right. Well, Ken, it sounds like you've got some of the questions you needed answered and some guidance, and you're planning on working on a draft.
Yep.
All right. What do you think your timeline for that is, just out of curiosity?
I'm like everybody, all of a sudden I'll force myself to sit down and do it, in one block of time, because that's the best way these get done. I will try to get a draft. I guess there's two ways I can do it. One is, I can try to run it back through the subcommittee, which is Brian and Mike, or the other is to say that's really not the most efficient step. Let me just try to get together and then send it out to the whole committee, because the committee is not very big. So I guess I would ask Brian and Mike, do you want me to just try to put this together and have the whole committee, or do you want a shot at it since we've created the subcommittee? I'm happy to go either way.
I'm happy either way.
I think you can just send it to everybody. I feel like everybody has a vested interest in it, and everyone's going to have an opinion as to what gets said regardless. So I think it makes sense for it to go to everybody.
I got thick skin. I can take that.
You'll get a quicker feedback for sure.
Yeah. Okay. I won't promise that I'll have it by the next meeting. But if I want to get it done so that I get it to you like 3 or 4 or 5 days in advance, not the day of, because that's not fair. So I will struggle to try to get it done in the next 3 weeks. I don't think it's a huge task. I do have some other commitments, because I am doing some stuff pro bono for AMC, and some of those have deadlines. And I'm just weaving in between that and this. But yeah, I will make a good effort. If not the next meeting, definitely by the following one. But I think we want to get the draft done so that you can take a shot at it before the summer.
That makes sense. Yeah, I didn't ask to put any pressure on. Whatever is possible for you, obviously.
Pressure is good.
Very nice of you to do it. So thanks.
Thank you, Ken.
Okay. Anything else on Prospect Farm? It's 8:30, so we should probably move along. Okay. I don't think there's anything for Jackson Falls, Dundee, or Wildcat River. So unless anyone has anything for those, we can jump to Gray's Inn and maybe try to make this point of conversation fairly quick, since it is 8:30.
I just had a really quick question. If anybody's interested in doing any more planting at the falls, doesn't have to be for this meeting, can be next meeting. Just people might want to think about it.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
On Gray's Inn, there was a discussion at the planning board about potentially looking at the land behind Gray's Inn for housing. And I don't know whether the other members here picked up on that or not, but that was a discussion at the planning board. And there was no action on it, but you know, we have been charged with trying to give advice and so forth on that property. And obviously there's a pretty extensive trail system there.
Yeah.
Hey, Ken,
Go ahead, Brian.
Ken, what stopped the progress last time when there was an effort to develop that area? Do you remember?
I have no knowledge. I just know that from the last planning board, it was put forth as a concept.
Yeah, there was some mention of in the planning board minutes of there having been an effort or a plan in the past. And it sounded like other people on the planning board didn't have any recollection of that either.
No, it was. I don't know if it was 6 or 8 years ago.
That was before I was on the Conservation Commission, Brian, so I just don't have a history with it. But I think it, you know, it does beg the question of what our, and maybe it doesn't have any legs at all. You know, a lot of the times these are concepts that come up that don't go anywhere. But I think as a Conservation Commission, you know, if it is going to start to move forward as a concept, we need to address just what's our thoughts about it, or our.
I think there's got to be some drawings that already show what that. I'm pretty sure I can remember seeing some engineering for what the plan would have been for the past development process.
You mean before the town owned it or after?
Say that again, Ken?
Before the town owned it or after?
I think it was after.
Dick, do you have any knowledge on that?
Well, there was the charrette that a lot of people attended and had their input, and then I can't remember who did the plot of, you know, just it was a conceptual thing of what to do with, you know, for a highway garage, the Whitney Center, all the things that happened, or many of the things that happened. And in the past, this idea of using the land behind the library and behind the town office for housing, you know, any kind of housing, affordable housing, what do they call it? Anyway, it's come up before. It's also, I think, was shot down because the land was bought, I think, to save the, you know, to leave some green space in the center of the village. So, you know, it'll probably come up any number of times over the years in the future. And whether it has legs or not, I couldn't really tell you, but I know in the past that the feeling was to leave it alone. We don't want to develop it. It's a nice little piece of property, and it gives many people access to you know, a nice little trail and place to get outside. I've been up there with families walking through. They do the story on the storyboards through there, bringing their kids through. So I mean, it has, to me, it has great purpose. I would like to see a trail along the brook behind the library and down to the parking lot, because I think there was some avenue through there originally, and it's kind of gotten grown in. But anyway, that's after we sort out many other things.
I think Will just put up a chat thing, if you saw it, that it was being considered for workforce housing.
Workforce housing, thank you, I couldn't think of it. Yeah. Or elderly,
Yeah, I think that was the one that I saw mentioned in the planning board minutes. I guess I wonder if it would just make sense for us to basically reach out to the planning board and say that we'd like to be kept in the loop and offered the opportunity to weigh in accordance with our, charge to manage that property, and as things develop, just to make sure that we're involved at some level. That makes sense?
well,
Yeah, I think that would be appropriate.
a few years ago,
when I-
there was an initiative to have the various boards get together once in a while and talk to each other, which was a good idea. I haven't seen it happen too much, but it would be very beneficial.
Mike, go ahead.
Nothing important. I was just gonna say, when I saw it in the minutes, I just kind of thought, I can't imagine that it would be something that would move forward, considering that the library uses that space like fairly regularly for, events and courses and classes, and there's an established trail. There's established trails back there. I'd be really hard pressed to think that it would be a spot that would get developed, considering the amount of town employees that already use it, and the town people that do. I mean, obviously. Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead, Tim.
I was just gonna say, maybe we should consider looking into a conservation easement.
Yeah, I wondered about that.
And it is a spot of, I guess I don't know exactly where they're thinking about building, but there is, cultural significance in that the orchard is there. There's the foundations are there. So, there's that aspect as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm happy to reach out to Bill and to Scott or anyone else on the planning board, and I can see if they can just basically keep us updated, and if they're planning on discussing it at the next meeting, maybe myself or anyone else could attend and comment. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, sounds good. The last thing that I had on the agenda was I just wanted to give everyone an update. A couple of months ago, we got an outreach letter from an organization called the Saco Headwaters Alliance. They, along with the consultant that they're working with, were looking to make a presentation at a conservation commission meeting or any town board meeting. But Bill Terry responded to the organization, basically saying that it would make sense to kind of like Dick mentioned, have it be presented to all three boards at once: Conservation Commission, the Planning Board, and the Select Board. They kind of need to do it by either April or May, and so I was wondering if everyone would be all right if I invited them to come and attend our April meeting. It sounds like a 15 to 20 minute presentation followed by a 15 to 20 minute set of questions and conversations and discussions. Does that sound good to everyone?
Sounds good.
Okay. And Dick, I did let Bill know I was going to plan to do that. He said he'd attend a Conservation Commission meeting, and if you're able to make it, then we'd cover those three boards. Although I guess it sounds like you may not be on the Select Board at that point.
Now, I think, when is the town meeting?
Oh, that's right. It's May. Yeah. Right.
I'm there till then.
Okay. All right. Perfect. Well, I'll let them know that it's going to be April, and I'm sure they'll have some information to distribute beforehand. But otherwise, I think that's it for tonight, unless anyone else has anything before we close it out.
Quick, make motion.
All right, Dick makes a motion. Oh wait, I guess you can't, Dick, until you're an alternate.
I was just giving a hint.
All right.
Make a motion to end the meeting.
Thanks, Brian. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Pam seconds. All those in favor say aye.
Hi.
All right. Sounds like we got it. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.